The billionaire laughed when the girl in the wheelchair said, "Don't adopt me." But when she whispered, "Please adopt my mom instead," his smile vanished. What came next brought this powerful man to his knees. The Snowbrook Christmas market was alive with the kind of magic that only the holiday season could bring. Twinkling golden lights hung from every wooden stall, casting a warm glow over the freshly fallen snow. The scent of roasted chestnuts and hot cocoa mingled with the crisp winter air, and somewhere in the distance, a choir sang carols that seemed to float on the gentle breeze like whispered prayers. But not everyone at the market was there to celebrate. Marcus Whitmore stepped out of his luxury vehicle with the practiced indifference of a man who had seen too much of the world to be impressed by anything anymore. At 42 years old, he had built Whitmore Industries into a global empire worth billions, but somewhere along the way, he had lost something far more valuable than money could ever measure. His heart had become as cold as the December wind that now brushed against his face. "Mr. Whitmore, are you sure you want to walk through the market?" Victoria Hayes, his personal assistant, asked with barely concealed disdain as she surveyed the crowd of ordinary people enjoying their simple pleasures. "These charity events are always so crowded with certain types of people." "The Snowbrook Children's Foundation expects my appearance," Marcus replied flatly. "It's good for the company's image." What he didn't say was that his therapist had suggested he needed to reconnect with humanity. After his divorce 3 years ago and the loss that had preceded it, Marcus had retreated into a fortress of isolation, surrounded by wealth, but utterly alone. His penthouse in the city felt more like a mausoleum than a home, and the silence there had become deafening. As they walked through the market, Victoria made sure to clear a path, her sharp words cutting through the crowd like a blade. "Move aside, please. Important people coming through." Marcus barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on nothing in particular, his mind already calculating how quickly he could make his donation, shake a few hands, and return to his empty existence. That's when he heard it. A small voice, clear as a bell, cutting through the noise of the market. "Mommy, look! The snow is dancing!" Marcus turned toward the sound and saw her for the first time. A little girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, sitting in a wheelchair that had seen better days. The chair's handles were wrapped with ribbons, a touching attempt to make something medical feel festive. She had her face turned up toward the sky, watching the snowflakes fall with an expression of pure wonder that Marcus hadn't seen in years. Beside her stood a woman who could only be her mother. Even from a distance, Marcus could see the exhaustion etched into her features, the kind of tiredness that comes not from a single sleepless night, but from years of carrying burdens too heavy for one person. Yet despite her obvious fatigue, she smiled down at her daughter with a love so fierce and pure that it made Marcus's chest tighten unexpectedly. "Yes, baby," the woman said softly. "The snow is dancing just for you." "Do you think it knows it's almost Christmas?" the little girl asked. "I think it knows exactly when to make everything beautiful." Marcus found himself frozen in place, unable to look away from this simple exchange between mother and daughter. There was something about them, something that pulled at a part of him he had thought was dead forever. "Mr. Whitmore?" Victoria's sharp voice interrupted his thoughts. "We need to keep moving. The foundation directors are waiting." But before Marcus could respond, disaster struck. A group of teenagers, laughing and pushing each other playfully, came rushing through the crowded market. One of them wasn't watching where he was going and collided directly with the wheelchair, sending it spinning. The little girl cried out as her chair tipped dangerously. Without thinking, Marcus lunged forward. His expensive coat dragged through the snow as he caught the wheelchair just before it could topple completely, his hand steadying the child inside. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. The little girl looked up at him with eyes that seemed far too wise for someone so young. Instead of crying or showing fear, she simply nodded and said, "Thank you, mister. You have sad eyes." The observation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Children, he had forgotten, could see things that adults had learned to hide. "Lily! Oh my goodness, Lily!" The mother rushed forward, her face pale with fear. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Did she bump into you? I can pay for any damage to your coat. I just need time. I can work extra shifts. Stop." Marcus held up a hand, and the woman fell silent immediately, her eyes dropping to the ground in that way he had seen so many people do when they were afraid of those with power. It made something uncomfortable twist in his stomach. She did nothing wrong, he continued, his voice softening slightly. Some teenagers weren't watching where they were going. Your daughter is the one who was almost hurt. The woman, Grace, as Marcus would later learn her name, finally looked up. Her eyes were filled with unshed tears, and a gratitude that seemed excessive for such a simple act. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for catching her." Victoria appeared at Marcus's side, her expression one of barely concealed disgust. "Mr. Whitmore, we really must go. These people are clearly fine, and you don't want to catch anything standing so close to—" "Victoria!" Marcus's voice was ice. Not another word. His assistant's mouth snapped shut, though her eyes blazed with resentment. Marcus turned back to the little girl, Lily, who was still watching him with that unnervingly perceptive gaze. "You didn't answer my question, mister," she said. "Why are your eyes so sad?" "Lily!" Grace gasped. "You can't ask strangers questions like that." "I'm so sorry, sir. She doesn't understand." "She understands perfectly," Marcus interrupted quietly. "Perhaps better than most adults I know." He knelt down in the snow, bringing himself to eye level with the child. It was something he hadn't done in years, hadn't needed to do, hadn't wanted to do since. He pushed the memory away before it could surface. "I suppose," he said carefully, "that I've forgotten how to see the snow dance." Lily tilted her head, considering this. "That's very sad. The snow dance is every winter. How could you forget?" "Sometimes grown-ups forget the important things. Mommy says the important things are the ones that don't cost money," Lily replied matter-of-factly, "like hugs, and stories before bed, and watching the snow dance together." Marcus felt something crack in the ice around his heart. This child, who clearly had so little in terms of material wealth, spoke of riches that he, with all his billions, had never truly possessed. "Your mommy sounds very wise," he said. "She's the wisest person in the whole world," Lily declared with absolute certainty. "She works so hard for us. 2 jobs, sometimes 3, and she still reads to me every night, even when she's so tired her eyes close in the middle of the story." Grace was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "Lily, sweetheart, the nice man doesn't need to hear about our—" "I want to hear," Marcus said, surprising even himself. "I want to hear everything." Victoria made a sound of disgust behind him. "Mr. Whitmore, this is highly inappropriate. These people are obviously trying to get money from you. It's a common scam. Find a rich person, put on a sob story. Victoria, you're fired." The words left Marcus's mouth before he had fully processed them. But once they were out, he realized he meant them completely. His assistant's face went white, then red with fury. "You can't be serious. Over these nobodies? These nobodies have shown more humanity in 5 minutes than you have in 3 years of working for me." Marcus stood, his eyes cold as he faced her. "Collect your things from the office tomorrow. Security will escort you." Victoria sputtered, searching for words, but ultimately turned and stormed away through the crowd, her designer heels clicking angrily against the cobblestones. When Marcus turned back to Grace and Lily, he found them both staring at him with identical expressions of shock. "You didn't have to do that," Grace said quietly. "She was just protecting you. People like us, we're used to being looked at that way." "No one should be used to that," Marcus replied. "And she wasn't protecting me. She was protecting her own prejudices." Lily tugged on his coat sleeve, and when he looked down at her, she was smiling. "I like you," she announced. "You're not like other fancy people." "How many fancy people do you know?" Marcus asked, finding himself almost smiling for the first time in months. "Just you. But I've seen them on TV. They never kneel in the snow. They're too worried about their fancy pants." A laugh escaped Marcus before he could stop it. It was a rusty sound, unpracticed, but genuine. "Lily, we should go," Grace said gently, though her eyes lingered on Marcus with something like wonder. "We still need to find something for dinner, and the market will close soon." "What about the charity dinner?" Lily asked. "You said they give free food to kids like me there." Grace's face flushed with embarrassment. "Lily, we talked about this. We can't just show up. You need tickets, and tickets cost money." Marcus's heart clenched. The charity dinner, the very event he was supposed to be attending as the guest of honor. An event where wealthy donors would eat gourmet meals and pat themselves on the back for writing checks, while families like Grace and Lily scraped by on whatever they could find. "What if I told you," Marcus said slowly, "that I happened to have 2 extra tickets to that dinner?" Grace's eyes widened. "Sir, we couldn't possibly—" "Please," Lily said, looking up at him with those 2 wise eyes. "Mommy hasn't had a real dinner in so long. She always gives her food to me and says she's not hungry, but I hear her tummy growling at night." "Lily!" Grace's voice was strained, her pride clearly warring with her desperation. Marcus made a decision in that moment. He didn't fully understand it, didn't know where it would lead, but something about this mother and daughter had awakened a part of him that had been sleeping for far too long. "It would be my honor," he said, "to have you both as my guests." And as he looked into Lily's eyes, seeing reflected there a hope that he had forgotten existed, Marcus Whitmore began to wonder if perhaps the real charity that night wouldn't be the checks he wrote, but the lesson he was about to learn from a little girl in a wheelchair who saw the world more clearly than he ever had. He had no idea that this night would change everything, that this child would make a request so unexpected, so profound, that it would bring one of the world's most powerful men to his knees. But that moment was still to come. For now, as the snow continued to dance around them and the Christmas lights sparkled like earthbound stars, 3 strangers stood at the beginning of a story that would transform all of their lives. And somewhere in the distance, the choir sang of miracles and hope, and the magic of believing in something greater than yourself. The grand ballroom of the Snowbrook Hotel was a monument to excess. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings painted with Renaissance-style murals, casting prismatic light across tables draped in silk and set with china that cost more than most people earned in a month. The elite of society mingled beneath those glittering lights, their laughter echoing off marble columns as they sipped champagne that had been imported from France specifically for this occasion. Grace stood at the entrance, her hand gripping Lily's wheelchair so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She had never felt more out of place in her entire life. Every woman in the room wore gowns that probably cost more than a year of her rent. Every man wore watches and cufflinks that could have paid for Lily's medical treatments. And here she was, in her best dress, the one she had bought second-hand for job interviews, feeling like an imposter who had somehow stumbled into a world where she clearly didn't belong. "Mommy," Lily whispered, tugging at her sleeve. "Why does everyone look so sparkly?" "Because they have a lot of money, sweetheart," Grace replied quietly. "Do sparkly people smile more?" Grace looked around at the faces of the wealthy donors, noticing for the first time that despite their expensive clothes and glittering jewelry, very few of them actually looked happy. Their smiles were practiced, polished, professional. Nothing like the genuine joy she saw in Lily's face when they watched cartoons together on their tiny television, or when Grace managed to scrape together enough for ice cream as a special treat. "No, baby," she said softly. "I don't think they do." Marcus appeared beside them, and Grace felt a small measure of relief at seeing a familiar face in this sea of strangers. He had changed into formal attire for the dinner, and she couldn't help but notice how the other guests immediately straightened when they saw him, their eyes tracking his movements with a mixture of respect and envy. "I apologize for the delay," Marcus said. "There were some matters I needed to attend to. Are you ready to go in?" "I'm not sure we should," Grace admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everyone is staring at us. We don't belong here." "Mommy," Lily said with that unshakable confidence that children somehow possess, "the nice man invited us. That means we belong." Marcus looked down at Lily, and something shifted in his expression. It was subtle, a slight softening around his eyes, but Grace noticed it. "Your daughter is right," he said. "You're my guests, which means you belong exactly where I say you belong, and I say you belong at my table." As they made their way through the ballroom, Grace could feel the weight of every stare, hear the whispered comments that weren't quite quiet enough. "Who on earth are they? Did you see the wheelchair? How depressing. Marcus Whitmore with those people. There must be some mistake. Probably some charity case he's parading around for publicity." Each word was like a small knife, and Grace had to fight the urge to turn around and flee. She had endured humiliation before, countless times, but somehow this felt worse. This wasn't just about her. Her daughter was hearing these things too. But when she looked down at Lily, she saw that her daughter wasn't paying attention to the whispers at all. Instead, she was gazing around the room with wonder, pointing out the chandeliers to herself and counting the candles on each table. "Mommy, look!" Lily exclaimed. "There are 47 candles just on that one table. Can you imagine if we had 47 candles at home? We'd never need to worry about the lights going out again." Grace felt tears prick at her eyes. The lights going out. It happened more often than she wanted to admit, when the electric bill was more than she could manage and she had to choose between keeping the power on or buying Lily's medications. Those nights, they would huddle together under blankets, and Lily would pretend they were camping under the stars. Marcus had heard the comment too. His jaw tightened, and Grace saw him make a mental note of something, though she couldn't guess what. They reached the head table, and Grace's heart sank when she saw who was already seated there. She recognized some of the faces from magazines and newspapers, captains of industry and society, matrons who wielded their wealth like weapons. They all turned to look as Marcus approached with his unusual guests. "Marcus, darling." A woman with perfectly styled hair rose to greet them, her smile as sharp as cut glass. "We were wondering where you disappeared to, and who do we have here?" "Eleanor, this is Grace and her daughter Lily," Marcus replied evenly. "They'll be joining us this evening." Eleanor's eyes swept over Grace with the kind of assessment that made her feel like merchandise being evaluated and found wanting. Then her gaze dropped to Lily, to the wheelchair, and her smile became something that looked almost like pity, but colder. "How charitable of you, Marcus," Eleanor said, the word dripping with condescension. "It's always good to remember the less fortunate during the holiday season. Reminds us how blessed we are." "I'm not less fortunate," Lily piped up, her voice clear and steady. "I have my mommy. She says having someone who loves you is the biggest fortune anyone can have." The table fell silent. Eleanor's smile faltered, uncertain how to respond to such sincere simplicity. "Out of the mouths of babes," muttered a man at the end of the table, though whether it was approval or mockery, Grace couldn't tell. Marcus pulled out a chair for Grace and positioned Lily's wheelchair beside her. As he took his own seat, he leaned close to Grace and said quietly, "Don't let them intimidate you. Half these people inherited their money and have never worked a day in their lives. You've earned more respect in a single day than they have in their entire existence." Grace looked at him, surprised by the vehemence in his voice. "Why are you being so kind to us? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything." Before Marcus could answer, Lily reached across and patted his hand. "It's because he's lonely," she said matter-of-factly. "Really, really lonely. I can tell because he looks at us like we're something he lost a long time ago." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His face went pale, and for a moment, Grace saw something raw and broken flash across his features before he managed to compose himself. "Lily," Grace said gently, "remember what we talked about? Sometimes we shouldn't say everything we observe." "But it's true," Lily insisted. "And my teacher says the truth is important." "The truth is very important," Marcus agreed, his voice slightly hoarse. "And you're right, Lily. I have been lonely. For a very long time." The servers began bringing out the first course, an elaborate arrangement of food that Grace couldn't identify. She watched the others at the table to see which fork they used, trying not to make a mistake that would draw more attention to how out of place she was. Lily, however, had no such concerns. She examined her plate with curiosity, then looked up at the server. "Excuse me," she said politely, "but what is this? I've never seen food that looks like tiny sculptures before." The server, a young man who had clearly been trained to be invisible and efficient, actually paused and smiled at her. "It's a quail egg on a bed of microgreens, with a truffle oil drizzle, miss." "Wow, a quail egg? Those must come from very tiny chickens." "Quails, actually," the server replied, his smile widening. "They're small birds. Do they make tiny sounds? Like instead of cock-a-doodle-doo, do they say something really small like..." She made a tiny squeaking sound. Several people at nearby tables turned to look, and Grace felt her face burn with embarrassment. But then she heard something unexpected. Laughter. Real laughter. Not the polished social variety that filled the room, but genuine amusement. And it was coming from Marcus. He was laughing at Lily's quail impression, a deep, warm sound that seemed to surprise even him. The other guests stared in shock, many of them having never seen the famously cold billionaire display such open emotion. "I think," Marcus said when he caught his breath, "that you might be the most entertaining dinner companion I've ever had." Lily beamed at him. "Mommy says I ask too many questions, but I think questions are how you learn things. How else would I know about tiny quail sounds?" As the dinner progressed, Grace watched an extraordinary transformation unfold. Lily's innocent curiosity and unfiltered honesty seemed to crack something open in Marcus. He began asking her questions about her life, her favorite things, her dreams, and Lily, never one to hold back, told him everything. She told him about their small apartment that sometimes got too cold in winter, about how her mommy worked at a diner during the day and cleaned offices at night, about the kind neighbors who sometimes watched her when Grace had to work double shifts, about the doctors and hospitals, and the surgery she needed but they couldn't afford. "What surgery?" Marcus asked, his voice carefully controlled. "For my legs," Lily said simply. "The doctor says there's an operation that might help me walk again, but it costs a lot of money. More money than exists in the whole world, probably." "It's not more than exists in the whole world," Grace interjected quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "But it might as well be. We've tried everything. Fundraisers, charity applications, loans. But we don't qualify for most programs, and the surgery is considered elective because Lily can survive without it. She just can't—" Her voice broke. "Walk," Lily finished for her. "I just can't walk. But that's okay, Mommy. I have my wheels, and you push me everywhere. Even when your back hurts. Even when you're so tired you can barely stand up yourself." Grace was crying now, unable to hold back the tears. She had tried so hard to protect Lily from understanding how desperate their situation was, but children always knew more than adults gave them credit for. "How much?" Marcus asked. "Excuse me?" "The surgery. How much does it cost?" Grace shook her head. "Mr. Whitmore, I can't accept—" "I'm not offering yet. I'm asking a question. How much?" $300,000, Grace whispered. "Plus rehabilitation, plus follow-up care. We're looking at close to $500,000 total." Around the table, the wealthy guests shifted uncomfortably. $500,000. To them, it was a rounding error, the cost of a luxury car or a modest vacation home. To Grace, it was an impossible mountain that she had been trying to climb for years. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "How tragic. You know, there are programs for people like you. Government assistance, that sort of thing. Have you tried?" "She's tried everything." Marcus cut her off, his voice cold. "She's worked herself to exhaustion trying to give her daughter a chance. What have you done lately, Eleanor, besides redecorate your yacht?" Eleanor's face flushed with anger, but she said nothing. Lily tugged on Marcus's sleeve again. "Mr. Marcus, can I ask you something?" "You can ask me anything, Lily. Why don't you have any family? This is a very big party for someone who came alone." The question hung in the air like a held breath. Grace saw Marcus's hand tighten around his glass, saw the careful mask he wore slip just slightly. "I had a family once," he said quietly. "A wife. We were going to have a daughter. But there was an accident. A long time ago." "Oh." Lily's voice was soft with understanding far beyond her years. "So you know what it's like to lose people you love?" "Yes, I do." "Is that why you're so sad all the time? Because you're missing them?" Marcus nodded slowly, seeming unable to speak. "I'm sorry," Lily said simply. "I'm sorry you lost them. But you know what my mommy says? She says that people we love never really leave us. They live in our hearts forever. And when we do good things, we're making them proud." A single tear escaped down Marcus's cheek before he could stop it. He wiped it away quickly, but not before Grace saw it, and not before she understood that this powerful man, with all his money and influence, was carrying a grief that no amount of wealth could heal. "Your mother is very wise," Marcus managed to say. "She's the wisest," Lily agreed, "and the bravest, and the most beautiful. She deserves all the good things in the whole world. That's why—" She paused, as if considering whether to continue. "That's why what, Lily?" But Lily just shook her head. "Never mind. Not yet. The snow hasn't finished dancing." Grace didn't understand what her daughter meant, but she saw something in Lily's eyes, a determination that she had seen before. It was the same look Lily got when she was planning something, working something out in that extraordinary mind of hers, and Grace couldn't shake the feeling that whatever her daughter was planning, it was going to change everything. The dinner continued around them, but something had shifted. Marcus kept looking at Lily with an expression that Grace couldn't quite read, and Lily, for all her apparent innocence, seemed to be studying Marcus right back. Two broken people, finding pieces of themselves in each other, and a little girl in a wheelchair, holding a secret that would soon bring one of the world's most powerful men to his knees. The days following the charity dinner passed in a blur for Grace. She had expected that night to be a beautiful anomaly, a brief glimpse into a world she would never belong to, followed by a return to her normal life of endless work and constant worry. She had expected Marcus Whitmore to forget about them the moment they left the ballroom, to file them away as a momentary distraction from his important life. She had been wrong. It started with small things. A delivery of groceries to their apartment, premium items that Grace could never have afforded on her own. When she called the store to explain there must have been a mistake, they informed her that everything had been paid for in full, and deliveries would continue weekly until further notice. Then came the medical equipment. A brand new wheelchair for Lily, lightweight and designed specifically for children, with smooth wheels that glided effortlessly across any surface. It arrived with a simple note that read, "Every princess deserves a proper carriage." Lily had laughed with delight when she saw it, spinning herself in circles in their tiny living room, while Grace stood frozen, not knowing whether to feel grateful or overwhelmed or something else entirely. But it was what happened next that truly changed everything. Grace was working her evening shift at the cleaning company when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, assuming it was spam, but something made her look. "I would like to visit you and Lily tomorrow, if you're amenable. There are things I need to discuss with you both. Marcus Whitmore." She stared at the message for so long that her supervisor had to call her name twice before she snapped back to reality. A billionaire wanted to visit her apartment. A tiny, cramped apartment with its peeling wallpaper and second-hand furniture, and the constant smell of the restaurant below. The apartment where she sometimes had to choose between heat and food. Her first instinct was to say no, to protect herself and Lily from whatever this was, because in Grace's experience, when powerful people took an interest in people like her, it never ended well. But then she thought of Lily, of the way her daughter had looked at Marcus during the dinner, as if she could see something in him that others couldn't, of the strange connection that had formed between them over quail eggs and honest questions. She typed back a simple response: "We would be honored." The next afternoon, Grace rushed home from her morning shift at the diner, her heart pounding as she tried to make their small apartment presentable. She scrubbed surfaces that were already clean, arranged and rearranged the meager decorations they had, and changed her clothes 3 times before finally giving up and accepting that no amount of preparation would make her home look like anything other than what it was, the dwelling of a family struggling to survive. Lily, meanwhile, seemed completely unconcerned. She sat by the window in her new wheelchair, watching the street below with patient anticipation. "Mommy, you're worrying too much," she said calmly. "Mr. Marcus isn't coming to look at our apartment. He's coming to see us." "How do you know that, sweetheart?" Lily turned to look at her mother with those eyes that saw far too much. "Because when you're really lonely, you don't care about fancy things. You just want to be somewhere that feels like home. And our apartment feels like home." Grace felt tears threatening again. Her daughter had a way of cutting through all the noise and finding the simple truth at the center of everything. A knock at the door made them both jump. Grace smoothed her clothes one final time, took a deep breath, and opened it. Marcus Whitmore stood in the narrow hallway, looking almost comically out of place against the faded walls and flickering overhead light. He was dressed more casually than Grace had ever seen him, but even his casual clothes probably cost more than everything in her closet combined. But what struck her most was his expression. He looked nervous. This man who commanded boardrooms and made decisions that affected thousands of people seemed genuinely anxious about entering her small apartment. "Please come in," Grace said, stepping aside. Marcus entered slowly, his eyes taking in everything. The water stain on the ceiling that the landlord kept promising to fix. The ancient radiator that clanked and groaned but barely produced heat. The small kitchen where Grace performed daily miracles with limited ingredients. the corner where Lily's medical supplies were neatly organized in donated containers. Grace waited for the judgment, the pity, the barely concealed disgust. She had seen all of those reactions before from people who glimpsed how she lived. Instead, Marcus walked to the wall where Grace had hung Lily's artwork. Dozens of drawings, most of them featuring a figure in a wheelchair and another figure standing beside her, always holding hands. In every picture, despite the simple crayon strokes, the figures were smiling. "She drew these?" Marcus asked quietly. "Everyone. She says drawing is how she tells stories when words aren't enough." Marcus studied one particular drawing more closely. It showed two figures in a wheelchair and standing beside it, but this one had a third figure, taller, standing slightly apart from the others. Above the third figure, Lily had drawn a dark cloud, but from the cloud, small rays of light were beginning to emerge. When did she draw this one? Grace looked at it and felt her breath catch. The night after the charity dinner. She worked on it for hours before she fell asleep. Marcus said nothing, but Grace saw his hand tremble slightly as he reached out to touch the paper. "Mr. Marcus!" Lily's voice rang out as she wheeled herself over to greet him. "You came! I knew you would!" "You knew?" Marcus turned to face her, and Grace watched as his entire demeanor softened. "How did you know?" "Because we're not finished yet," Lily said matter-of-factly. "The story isn't over." "What story is that?" Lily smiled mysteriously. "You'll see. But first, do you want to see my room? It's very small, but Mommy made it special." Marcus looked at Grace, who nodded her permission, and then followed Lily as she wheeled herself down the short hallway. Grace trailed behind, watching as her daughter gave a tour of their humble home as if it were a palace. "This is where I sleep," Lily announced, gesturing to her small bed with its worn but clean sheets. "Mommy read me a story here every single night. Even when she's so tired she can barely keep her eyes open. She never misses. Not ever." "That's quite a commitment," Marcus said. "She says stories are important. They help us dream about who we can become, even when real life is hard." Grace leaned against the doorframe, watching this strange interaction. A billionaire, sitting on the edge of her daughter's second-hand bed, listening intently to a child explain the importance of bedtime stories. "And this," Lily continued, pointing to a small box on her nightstand, "is my treasure box. Want to see what's inside? Only if you want to show me." Lily opened the box reverently. Inside were items that would mean nothing to most people. A smooth stone from the park. A pressed flower that had long since lost its color. A photograph, worn at the edges from being held too many times. "What's in the photograph?" Marcus asked gently. Lily handed it to him. "That's my daddy. He died when I was really little. I don't remember him, but Mommy tells me stories about him so I can know him anyway." Grace felt the familiar ache in her chest. Thomas had been gone for 6 years now, taken by an illness that had ravaged their finances before it took his life. She had never recovered, not really, not financially, and not emotionally, but she had kept going. For Lily. Always. For Lily. Marcus studied the photograph for a long moment. "He looks like he was a good man. Mommy says he was the best. She says he would have loved me so much that his heart would burst. She says sometimes hearts can be so full of love that they can't hold it all. I think she's right about that." Lily took the photograph back and placed it carefully in the box. Then she looked up at Marcus, with an expression that suddenly seemed far older than her years. "Mr. Marcus, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." Lily glanced at her mother, then back at Marcus. "Not here. Can we go for a walk? Just you and me? I need to show you something important." Grace started to object, but something in her daughter's eyes stopped her. Lily had never asked for anything like this before, and there was a seriousness in her small face that demanded respect. "Please, Mommy," Lily said softly. "I need to do this." Grace looked at Marcus, searching his face for any sign of ill intent. She found none, only a confusion that matched her own, and beneath it, a strange kind of hope. "Stay where I can see you from the window," Grace finally said. "And take your coat, Lily. It's cold outside." A few minutes later, Grace stood at the window, watching as Marcus pushed Lily's wheelchair down the sidewalk toward the small park at the end of their street. Snow had begun to fall again, light flurries that sparkled in the fading afternoon light. She had no idea what her daughter was planning, but she knew Lily well enough to know that whatever it was important. In the park, Marcus found a bench and sat down, positioning Lily's wheelchair to face him. The snow fell gently around them, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "What did you want to show me, Lily?" Marcus finally asked. Lily was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on something in the distance. Then she spoke, her voice carrying a weight that seemed impossible for someone so young. "I didn't want to show you something. I wanted to tell you something. Something important. I'm listening." "I know why you're being so nice to us," Lily said. "I figured it out at the dinner." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. "Why do you think I'm being nice to you?" "Because we remind you of them. Your wife and the baby you never got to meet." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had never told Lily the details of what he had lost, only that he had once had a family that was gone now. But somehow, this extraordinary child had understood. "How do you know about the baby?" he managed to ask. "When you talked about your wife at the dinner, you put your hand on your heart, but your eyes looked at my tummy. My mommy does the same thing sometimes when she's thinking about the baby brother I almost had, before the angels took him back to heaven." Marcus couldn't speak. This child, who had every reason to be focused on her own struggles, had been paying attention to his pain instead. "You want to help us because you think it will make the hurt go away," Lily continued gently. "Because if you save us, maybe it will feel like saving them. Is that so wrong?" Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. "No, but it's not the right reason either." Marcus looked at this small girl, sitting in her wheelchair in the falling snow, and felt something breaking open inside him. All the walls he had built, all the defenses he had constructed, seemed to crumble in the face of her simple honesty. "Then what is the right reason?" he asked. Lily reached out and took his hand in both of her small ones. Her fingers were cold from the winter air, but her grip was surprisingly strong. "The right reason is because everyone deserves to be loved, not because of what they remind you of, or what you can get from them, or what they can do for you, just because they're people, and people deserve love." "Your mother taught you that?" "My mommy taught me everything good that I know," Lily said. "She's the best person in the whole world, Mr. Marcus. The very best. And she's so tired, so tired. But she never stops. She never gives up. Even when I see her crying at night when she thinks I'm asleep, she wakes up the next morning and smiles for me." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face now, and for once, he didn't try to stop them. "What do you want from me, Lily? Really? If I could give you anything in the world, what would you ask for?" Lily was silent for a long moment. The snow fell around them like a blessing, like a promise, like the beginning of something new. And then she spoke the words that would change everything. "I don't want you to adopt me, Mr. Marcus." Marcus blinked in surprise. The thought of adoption had crossed his mind, though he hadn't voiced it. How had she known? "What I want," Lily continued, her voice steady despite the tears now rolling down her own cheeks, "is for you to adopt my mommy instead." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and profound. "I know that sounds silly," Lily rushed on. "I know you can't really adopt a grown-up. But what I mean is, my mommy needs someone to take care of her for once. She spent her whole life taking care of everyone else. First her parents, then my daddy when he was sick, then me. Always everyone else. Never herself." She gripped his hand tighter. "I'm just a kid, Mr. Marcus. I'll be okay because I have her. But who does she have? Who takes care of her when she's scared? Who holds her when she cries? Who tells her that everything is going to be okay?" Marcus couldn't breathe. This child, this remarkable, impossible child, was not asking for surgery or money or a better life for herself. She was asking him to love her mother. "Please," Lily whispered, "please don't adopt me. Adopt her. Give her a family. Give her someone who sees how amazing she is. She deserves that. She deserves everything." And as the snow continued to fall around them, Marcus Whitmore, billionaire, business titan, man who had everything and nothing all at once, fell to his knees in the cold, wet snow and wept like he hadn't wept since the day he lost his wife and unborn daughter. Because a little girl in a wheelchair had just taught him what love really meant, and nothing would ever be the same again. Marcus remained on his knees in the snow for what felt like an eternity. The cold seeped through his expensive clothes, numbing his legs, but he barely noticed. All he could feel was the earthquake happening inside his chest, the tectonic shift of everything he thought he knew about himself and the world. Lily sat quietly in her wheelchair, watching him cry, her small hand still holding his. She didn't try to comfort him with empty words or rush him to compose himself. She simply waited, with a patience that seemed impossible for someone her age, as if she understood that some storms needed to be weathered, not stopped. When Marcus finally looked up at her, his face wet with tears and snow, he saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen directed at him in years. Not pity, not judgment, not the calculated interest that everyone else showed the famous billionaire. It was compassion. Pure, simple, unconditional compassion. "How did you become so wise?" he asked, his voice raw. "I'm not wise," Lily said with a small shrug. "I just pay attention. Mommy says that's the secret to understanding people. You have to watch them, really watch them. Not just look at the outside, but see what's happening on the inside." "And what do you see when you look at me?" Lily tilted her head, considering the question seriously. "I see someone who built really tall walls because he was scared of getting hurt again. But walls that keep the bad stuff out also keep the good stuff out. You've been alone inside those walls for a really long time, Mr. Marcus. I think you forgot that being safe isn't the same as being happy." Marcus let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. A child had just summarized years of expensive therapy in a single observation. "Your mother doesn't know you're asking me this, does she?" he said. "No, she would never ask for herself. That's why I had to do it. Mommy spent her whole life putting everyone else first. Someone has to put her first for once." Marcus slowly rose to his feet, brushing the snow from his knees. His legs ached from the cold, but inside, something warm was beginning to spread through his chest. "Lily, I need you to understand something. What you're asking me, it's not simple. Your mother is a grown woman with her own thoughts and feelings. I can't just decide to be part of her life without her wanting that too." "I know," Lily nodded solemnly. "But you could try, couldn't you? You could show her that she deserves good things. You could be her friend first. And maybe, if you're really lucky, she might let you be more than that someday." Marcus looked back toward the apartment building, where he knew Grace was watching from the window. He thought about her face, the exhaustion that lived in her eyes alongside an unbreakable determination. He thought about the way she had looked at Lily during the charity dinner, with a love so fierce it seemed to burn. "I'm going to tell you something, Lily," he said quietly. "Something I've never told anyone." Lily waited, her eyes wide and attentive. "When my wife died, she was on her way to a doctor's appointment, a routine checkup for the baby. I was supposed to go with her, but I had a meeting. An important meeting, I thought. A deal worth millions of dollars." His voice cracked. "I chose money over my family and I lost them both." "That wasn't your fault," Lily said softly. "Maybe not the accident itself, but the choice I made, the priorities I had. That was my fault. I spent so many years building my business that I forgot to build my life. And by the time I realized what really mattered, it was too late." He knelt down again, this time to be at eye level with Lily. "You asked me to take care of your mother, but I need you to understand that I don't know if I remember how to take care of anyone. I've spent years pushing people away, hiding behind my money, using my wealth as a wall between me and the rest of the world. But you caught me," Lily said simply. "At the market, when my chair was falling. You didn't think about it. You just caught me. That's who you really are, Mr. Marcus. The person who catches people when they're falling." Something broke open in Marcus's heart at those words. He had spent so long believing he was cold, calculating, incapable of genuine human connection. But this child saw something different. She saw the man he used to be, the man he might still become. "We should get you back inside," he said, standing up and taking hold of her wheelchair. "Your mother will be worried." "Mr. Marcus?" "Yes, Lily? Thank you for listening to me. Most grown-ups don't really listen to kids. They just wait for us to stop talking." Marcus paused, looking down at this remarkable girl. "I have a feeling you have more important things to say than most of the adults I know." When they returned to the apartment, Grace was waiting at the door, her face tight with anxiety. Her eyes searched both of them, looking for signs of distress, trying to understand what had transpired in the park. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Everything is fine, Mommy," Lily said brightly. "Mr. Marcus and I just had a very important conversation about life and love and walls and catching people." Grace looked at Marcus with confusion in her eyes. He managed a small smile, though he knew his face probably showed the evidence of his tears. "Your daughter is extraordinary," he said quietly. "I hope you know that." "I do," Grace replied. "She's the best thing that ever happened to me." Marcus stayed for dinner that night. It was nothing like the elaborate meals served at the charity event, just simple pasta with sauce that Grace had made from scratch, using the groceries he had sent. They ate at the small kitchen table. The three of them crowded together in a space that should have felt cramped, but instead felt intimate. Lily dominated the conversation, telling stories about school, about her friends, about the dreams she had for the future. She talked about wanting to be a teacher someday, so she could help other kids the way her teachers had helped her. "Education is the most important thing," she declared with absolute certainty. "Mommy always says that knowledge is the only thing that nobody can ever take away from you." Marcus listened to every word, but his eyes kept drifting to Grace. He watched the way she looked at her daughter, with that burning love that seemed to light her up from within. He watched the way her hands moved as she served the food, graceful despite their roughness from years of hard work. He watched the way she laughed at Lily's jokes, a sound that seemed to fill the tiny apartment with warmth. And he felt something stirring inside him that he hadn't felt in years, something that terrified him and thrilled him in equal measure. After dinner, while Lily was getting ready for bed, Grace and Marcus stood together in the small living room. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words. "I should go," Marcus said finally. "It's getting late. Thank you for dinner." "Well, for the groceries that made dinner possible." Grace wrapped her arms around herself, a self-protective gesture. "I don't know why you're being so kind to us, but I want you to know that I don't expect anything. Whatever this is, whatever you're doing, you don't owe us anything." "What if I want to owe you something?" Marcus asked quietly. Grace looked at him with surprise. "What if I want to be part of your lives? Not because I feel obligated, not because of charity, but because—" He struggled to find the words. "Because being around you and Lily makes me feel like myself again, like the person I was before I lost everything. Mr. Whitmore." "Marcus, please." Grace took a deep breath. "Marcus, you're a billionaire. I'm a cleaning lady and a waitress. I live in a tiny apartment with a leaky ceiling and I can barely afford my daughter's medications. Whatever you're feeling right now, it's not real. It's just the holiday season and the emotion of everything that's happened. Is that what you really think? I think that men like you don't end up with women like me. I think that whatever fairy tale Lily has built in her head isn't how the real world works." Marcus stepped closer to her, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her tired eyes. "The real world told me that success was measured in dollars and deals. The real world told me that power came from intimidation and isolation. The real world convinced me that I didn't need anyone, that I was better off alone behind my walls." He paused. "The real world was wrong, Grace. About all of it." Before she could respond, a sound from Lily's room made them both turn. It was a cry, sharp and pained, unlike anything Grace had heard before. They rushed down the hallway together and found Lily on the floor beside her bed. She must have tried to transfer herself from her wheelchair and fallen, but it was worse than a simple fall. Her face was contorted in pain, and she was clutching her back, her breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. "Lily, baby, what happened?" Grace was on her knees beside her daughter in an instant. "It hurts, Mommy," Lily whimpered. "It really hurts, like fire inside me." Marcus already had his phone out, dialing emergency services. Within minutes, an ambulance was on its way, and the small apartment was filled with the sound of approaching sirens. The next hours were a blur of fluorescent lights and sterile hallways, and the particular smell of hospitals that Marcus had hoped never to experience again. St. Catherine Medical Center was a large facility, and they rushed Lily into the emergency department while Grace followed, her face pale with terror. Marcus stayed right beside her, refusing to leave even when hospital staff suggested he wait outside. He used his name, his influence, his money, anything to ensure that Lily received immediate attention from the best doctors available. Dr. Patricia Summers, the head of pediatric neurology, emerged after what felt like an eternity. Her face was professionally neutral, but there was concern in her eyes. "Mrs. Thornton," she addressed Grace, "your daughter's condition has progressed faster than we anticipated. The pressure on her spine has increased significantly. If we don't operate soon, there's a risk of permanent damage beyond what she's already experienced. Grace swayed on her feet, and Marcus caught her arm to steady her. "How soon?" she whispered. "Within the next 2 weeks, ideally. The surgery she needs is complex, but it's her best chance at not only preventing further damage, but potentially restoring some mobility." "The surgery," Grace's voice cracked. "We can't afford it. I've tried everything. Every program, every charity, every loan. We don't qualify. We fall through every crack in the system." Dr. Summers glanced at Marcus, clearly recognizing who he was. "Perhaps there are options." "Do it," Marcus said firmly. "Schedule the surgery. Whatever it costs, whatever she needs, do it." Grace spun to face him. "No, I can't let you do that. It's too much. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars." "I don't care if it's millions," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the emotion churning inside him. "That little girl in there just taught me more about love and courage in 1 week than I've learned in 42 years of living. If I can use my money to help her walk again, then for the first time in my life, that money will actually mean something." "But why?" Grace was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Why do you care so much about us?" Marcus thought about Lily's words in the park, about adopting Grace, about giving her someone who would take care of her for once, about being the person who catches people when they're falling. "Because your daughter asked me to," he said simply, "and because I'm starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, I was supposed to walk through that Christmas market that night. Maybe I was supposed to catch Lily when she was falling. Maybe everything that happened to me, all the loss and the pain and the years of loneliness, was leading me to that exact moment." He took Grace's hands in his own, feeling them tremble. "I can't bring back my wife. I can't hold the daughter I never got to meet. But I can be here right now for you and Lily. Not because I'm trying to replace what I lost, but because I'm finally ready to stop hiding from what I might find." Grace stared at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. She had been let down so many times, by systems and institutions and people who promised help that never came. Trust was not something she gave easily, but there was something in Marcus's eyes that she hadn't seen before. Not pity, not charity, something that looked almost like hope. "Okay," she whispered finally. "Okay." Marcus nodded, then turned to Dr. Summers. "Schedule the surgery, and make sure she has the best room, the best care, the best of everything. Send all the bills to my office." As the doctor hurried away to make arrangements, Grace collapsed into a chair in the waiting room. Her body shook with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. Years of fear and stress and desperate hope finally breaking free. Marcus sat down beside her and, after a moment's hesitation, put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, too exhausted to maintain the walls she had built around herself, and cried until she had no tears left. In a hospital room down the hall, Lily lay in a bed that was much more comfortable than her own at home. Despite the pain medication making her drowsy, she managed a small smile as she looked out the window at the snow still falling outside. Her plan had worked, not the way she had imagined it, not through some romantic gesture or fairy tale moment, but in the way that real life sometimes worked, through crisis and fear and the desperate need to help someone you love. She had asked Marcus to adopt her mother, to give her someone who would take care of her. And now, watching the snow dance in the light of the hospital parking lot, Lily had a feeling that the universe had been listening. Everything was about to change. The morning of Lily's surgery arrived wrapped in the kind of stillness that comes before life-changing moments. Grace had spent the night in a chair beside her daughter's hospital bed, drifting in and out of a restless sleep, filled with fragmented dreams and whispered prayers. Marcus had stayed too, despite Grace's insistence that he go home and rest. He had simply pulled another chair to the opposite side of Lily's bed and settled in, his presence a quiet anchor in the storm of fear and hope that swirled around them. When the first light of dawn began to filter through the hospital window, Lily stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, finding her mother's face first, then traveling across to where Marcus sat watching her with an expression that was equal parts tenderness and terror. "You both look terrible," Lily announced, her voice still thick with sleep. "Like you haven't slept at all." Grace let out a laugh that was dangerously close to a sob. "We wanted to be here when you woke up, sweetheart." Both of you? Both of us, Marcus confirmed. Lily smiled, that knowing smile that seemed to hold secrets far beyond her years. Good. That's good. The surgical team arrived shortly after, led by Dr. Summers, who explained the procedure one final time. The surgery would take approximately 6 hours. There were risks, as there always were with operations of this complexity, but the team was confident. They had done everything possible to prepare. "Do you have any questions, Lily?" Dr. Summers asked gently. Lily thought for a moment. "Will I dream while I'm asleep?" "You might. The anesthesia affects everyone differently." "I hope I dream about dancing," Lily said quietly. "I've never danced before." "Not really, but I dream about it sometimes. What it would feel like to spin and twirl without my wheels." Grace's hand flew to her mouth, trying to contain the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. Marcus reached across the bed and took her other hand, squeezing it tightly. "When you wake up," Dr. Summers said, her professional demeanor softening, "we're going to do everything we can to make that dream come true." As the orderlies prepared to wheel Lily toward the operating room, she reached out and grabbed both Grace's hand and Marcus's, pulling them closer. "Mommy, Mr. Marcus, I need to tell you something. Just in case." "Don't talk like that, baby," Grace whispered. "You're going to be fine. You're going to come back to us." "I know, but just in case." Lily's eyes were clear and bright, filled with a courage that seemed impossible for someone so young. "Mommy, you're the best mother in the whole entire world. Everything good about me comes from you. Everything." Tears were streaming down Grace's face now. "Lily, and Mr. Marcus." Lily turned to him, her small hand gripping his with surprising strength. "Thank you for catching me, not just at the market. Thank you for catching both of us. Promise me you won't let go. Promise me you'll keep catching my mommy when she falls. She needs someone to catch her. She's been falling for so long and pretending she's fine." Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest. "I promise, Lily, I promise." "Good." Lily nodded, satisfied. "Now I can go to sleep, and when I wake up, maybe we can all dance together." She was still smiling as they wheeled her through the double doors toward the operating room. The doors swung closed behind her, and suddenly Grace and Marcus were alone in the hallway, holding hands, united in their fear and hope. The next 6 hours were the longest of Marcus's life. He and Grace sat together in the private waiting room he had arranged, surrounded by comfortable furniture and soothing artwork that did nothing to ease the anxiety that gripped them both. Grace told him stories about Lily, about the day she was born, 3 weeks early, already fighting to survive, about her first word, which had been more, spoken while reaching for another spoonful of applesauce, about the accident when she was 3 that had damaged her spine and changed everything. The doctors said she might never sit up on her own, Grace recalled, her voice distant with memory. But Lily refused to accept that. She worked so hard every single day. Physical therapy, exercises, pure stubborn determination. Within a year, she was sitting up, then using her arms to move herself around. The wheelchair came later, when it became clear that walking wasn't going to happen without surgery. "She's a fighter," Marcus said. "She's a miracle." Grace looked at him with eyes that held depths of love and pain that he was only beginning to understand. "Everything I do for her. Every extra shift, every sacrifice. Every time I tell myself I'm not hungry when we don't have enough food. She's my whole world, Marcus, my entire reason for existing." "And who takes care of you?" he asked softly, echoing Lily's words from the park. Grace was silent for a long moment. "No one," she finally admitted. "Not since Thomas died. I learned to take care of myself because I had to. There was no one else. There is now." Grace looked at him, really looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time. "Why? Why do you care so much about us? We're nobody. We have nothing to offer you." Marcus thought about how to answer. He thought about his empty penthouse and his meaningless meetings, and the years he had spent building walls against a world that had taken everything from him. He thought about the night at the Christmas market, when a little girl had looked at him and seen his sadness. He thought about kneeling in the snow, weeping, as that same little girl asked him to love her mother. "You're not nobody," he said finally. "You're the first real thing I've encountered in years. You and Lily. You remind me that there's more to life than survival. More than just existing behind walls, protecting yourself from pain. Lily asked me to adopt you, because she sees what I was too blind to see at first. And what's that? That we're all broken in different ways. That we all need someone to catch us when we fall. That love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone whose broken pieces fit with yours. Grace was crying again, silent tears that traced familiar paths down her cheeks. I'm scared, Marcus. I'm scared to let anyone in. Every time I've trusted someone or something, I've been let down. The healthcare system, the insurance companies, the charity programs, the people who promised to help and never did. I've learned that the only person I can rely on is myself. Then let me prove you wrong, Marcus said. Let me show you that there are still people worth trusting. Let me be the exception to everything life has taught you. Before Grace could respond, Dr. Summers appeared in the doorway. Her surgical mask was pulled down around her neck, and there was something in her eyes that made both Grace and Marcus freeze. The surgery is complete, she said. Grace grabbed Marcus's hand so tightly he thought she might break his fingers. And, Dr. Summers smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes and transformed her entire face. It went even better than we hoped. The damage to her spine was less extensive than the imaging suggested. We were able to do everything we planned, and the early indicators are extremely positive. What does that mean? Grace's voice was barely a whisper. It means that with proper rehabilitation and time, there's a very good chance Lily will walk again. The sound that came from Grace was something between a scream and a sob. She collapsed against Marcus, her entire body shaking with the force of her relief. He held her tightly, his own tears falling freely now, all pretense of composure abandoned. When can we see her? He managed to ask. She's in recovery now. She'll be groggy for a while, but you can see her in about an hour. When they finally entered Lily's recovery room, she was awake, though her eyes were heavy with the lingering effects of anesthesia. But the moment she saw them, that familiar smile spread across her face. Did it work? She asked, her voice hoarse. Grace rushed to her side, taking her daughter's hand and pressing it to her tear-stained cheek. It worked, baby, it worked. The doctor says you're going to walk again. Really? Lily's eyes widened, then filled with tears of her own. Really and truly? Really and truly. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing this news that changed everything. Then she looked past her mother to where Marcus stood at the foot of her bed. Mr. Marcus, did you keep your promise? What promise, sweetheart? To catch my mommy while I was sleeping. Marcus moved closer, standing beside Grace, his hand finding its natural place on her shoulder. I held her hand the whole time, and I'm not planning to let go. Lily nodded, satisfied. Good, because I think we should keep him, Mommy, like a permanent catch person. Grace laughed through her tears, looking up at Marcus with something new in her eyes, something that looked like the beginning of trust. The weeks that followed were filled with the hard work of recovery. Lily threw herself into rehabilitation with the same determination that had defined her entire life. There were setbacks and frustrations, days when progress seemed impossible, and the dream of walking felt as distant as ever. But through it all, Marcus was there. He rearranged his entire life to be present for Lily's therapy sessions. He hired the best rehabilitation specialists money could buy. He converted the guest wing of his penthouse into a fully equipped recovery center so that Grace and Lily could move out of their cramped apartment and have everything they needed. Grace resisted at first, her pride and independence battling against his generosity. But Marcus was patient. He didn't push or pressure. He simply showed up, day after day, proving through his actions what his words alone could never convey. One evening, 3 months after the surgery, Marcus and Grace sat on the balcony of his penthouse, watching the sun set over the city skyline. Lily was inside, resting after a particularly challenging therapy session. She took 4 steps today, Grace said quietly. 4 steps on her own. I know. I was watching. Marcus smiled at the memory, the look on her face. She's going to walk, really walk. Run, maybe, someday. Grace shook her head in wonder. A year ago, I couldn't even let myself dream of this. And now? Grace turned to look at him, and there was no more fear in her eyes. No more walls, no more barriers built from years of disappointment and survival. There was only openness, vulnerability, and something that looked remarkably like love. Now I have everything I never dared to hope for. My daughter is healing. We have a home, we have security, and we have... She paused, searching for the right words. "We have each other," Marcus finished for her. Grace reached out and took his hand. "Lily asked you to adopt me, to give me someone who would take care of me." "But you didn't just do that, Marcus. You gave me back my ability to believe, to trust, to hope." "You gave me something too," he replied. "You and Lily gave me a reason to stop hiding, a reason to tear down the walls I'd built, a reason to live again, really live, instead of just existing." He stood up, pulling her gently to her feet. "I want to ask you something, Grace. And I want you to know that whatever your answer is, I'm not going anywhere. But I need to ask." "Ask," she whispered. "I know it's only been a few months. I know we're still learning who we are together. But I also know that sometimes, when you find something real, something true, you hold on to it with everything you have." He took a deep breath. "Grace Thornton, I'm not asking to adopt you. But I am asking if you would consider someday when you're ready, letting me be your family, letting me be Lily's family, letting us build something together that none of us could build alone." Grace was crying again, but these were different tears. These were tears of joy, of release, of finally allowing herself to believe in happy endings. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes." The wedding took place 6 months later, in the small park where Lily had first asked Marcus to adopt her mother. It was a simple ceremony, attended by only a handful of people who had become important to their new family. But the moment that everyone would remember, the moment that would be talked about for years to come, happened at the reception. Lily, who had been working in secret with her physical therapists, stood up from her wheelchair. Grace and Marcus watched in shock as their daughter took one step, then another, walking slowly but steadily across the dance floor toward them. "You said you wanted to dance together," Lily said, her voice strong and clear. "Well, I've been practicing." Grace fell to her knees, pulling her daughter into her arms, sobbing with a joy too big for words. Marcus wrapped his arms around both of them, holding his new family close, feeling for the first time in years that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. "Thank you," he whispered to Lily. "Thank you for seeing what I couldn't see. Thank you for asking me to catch your mother. Thank you for teaching me what love really means." Lily looked up at him with those wise, wonderful eyes. "Thank you for listening," she said. "Most grown-ups don't listen to kids, but you did, and look what happened." The music started, a soft, gentle melody that seemed to float on the evening air like a promise. And there, in the park where snow had once danced around them, Marcus Whitmore danced with his wife and daughter for the first time, not as a billionaire, not as a broken man hiding behind walls of wealth and isolation, but as a father, a husband, a man who had finally learned that the greatest fortune in the world couldn't be counted in dollars, but only in the love of those who saw you for who you really were and chose to stay anyway. Lily had asked him not to adopt her. She had asked him to adopt her mother instead, and in doing so, she had given all three of them something far more precious than adoption papers could ever represent. She had given them a family,